Hello and welcome to Late Night Mondlicht. I hope everyone is having a relaxing day today. It is a rainy and chilly Sunday evening here on the East Coast. I have a coffee and my cat's here with me. Thank you for tuning in. So, I'm a new channel and I'm here to discuss the topics that I'm the most passionate about: cinema, space, history, and all that such. But I also wanted to create a podcast for something that has really just become a part time job at this point, which is my true crime research. I have two cases that I have dedicated a huge portion of my life to: Amy Bradley and the Dyatlov Pass case. And I'm hoping to use this channel as just a productive outlet for the time and energy that I've been spending on these cases. I want to give a fresh and new perspective, and I just want to, bring further discussion to these cases. With this podcast, Finding Amy Bradley, I want to break down this case, analyze every angle of it, episode by episode, and truly figure out what happened to her and how we can find her. Amy needs justice. Her story is incredibly important and it needs to be heard. I believe what happened to her was a massive wake up call to the world, and it shines a bright light on a very dark part of our society. And yet, even today, with today's current events, people still can't face it. Well, this podcast is going to face it, and I'm going to take my sweet time while I do so. So, this first episode is going to be a little all over the place because it's serving as an introductory episode, but I also want to give a brief overview of the case and then really go in deep into everything that we know that happened on that cruise ship. I really want to break down where she was last seen, who she was last seen with, and then dissect the quote unquote criminal investigation from the FBI. But everything that happens afterwards, everything in Curacao, everything with Jazz, and all the eyewitness sightings, they will all have their own dedicated episodes in the future. Today, we're just going to start off with the basics and go from there. Amy Lynn Bradley was born May 12th, 1974, in Virginia, United States. She was 23 years old, just graduated from Longwood University, and she was working as a waitress at a restaurant. She seemed to be very spunky, high energy, funny, and just all around a cool girl. She really strikes me as someone, what you see is what you get. She's bold and expressive, but very sweet, and people were really drawn to her. She was living the typical young adult life in the late 90s. She had just gotten a new apartment, and she had just gotten a new puppy, Bailey. Her parents, Ron and Iva Bradley, their job gave away an annual Christmas bonus that included an all-inclusive trip to the Royal Caribbean cruise liner, the Rhapsody of the Seas. Her parents were allowed to bring her and her brother Brad along with them. Amy told her boyfriend and her brother that she was a little apprehensive about going on a cruise because she was a little scared of the ocean. She was an excellent swimmer, but there was something about the ocean that just bothered her. Now, this is common from even the most experienced swimmers. No matter how talented you are in the water, there is something about the ocean that is just scary. It's vast, there's a lot of unknowns. I get it. So, this is a common fear, and Amy was not going to let this fear get in the way of her experiencing this type of exciting vacation. Now, the vacation itself, the cruise liner, the Rhapsody of the Seas, it starts off in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and they'll be sailing down the southern Caribbean islands. So, first they'll hit up Aruba, and then Curacao, and then St. Martin, and then I believe after St. Martin, they'll make their way back to San Juan again. So, the family flew to San Juan to start the excursion, and on March 21st, 1998, the cruise ship left San Juan and made its way to Aruba. This was a full day and night, and Amy and her family spent it enjoying the luxuries of the cruise ship. They went to the restaurants, the casinos, the bars, all that. When they arrived to Aruba, they went out and they enjoyed the island. They had quite the adventure getting lost, but they made it back to the cruise ship later in the day. Later in the evening, The family attended a formal dinner where everyone on the ship gathers and celebrates the night. The family had a good time. They had an elegant dinner. They took lots of photos, and there was a party afterwards. The family did notice that Amy received special attention from some of the wait staff, and one of the waiters even asked if Amy would like to go to Carlos and Charlie's, a bar in Aruba. In future episodes, we'll be talking at great lengths all about Carlos and Charlie's, so I suggest putting a pin in this for now. But Amy was smart. She said, of course, she would not get off the ship to go with them. The family did notice that the wait staff was making eyes at Amy, was making eyes at the family, and I don't think they took much note of it. It was just something that they noticed and then moved on from. And the waiter was not the only person to pay special attention to Amy. The family also noticed that there was two women that Amy was speaking to for over an hour. They appeared to be wearing naval attire. The family did not recognize them. They did not recognize who they worked for or what they worked for, and they couldn't identify why Amy would be talking to them for so long. When they approached Amy to kind of, ask her, hey, what are you doing? The two women seemed to kind of back away a little bit and didn't pay them any attention. Again, in hindsight, the family did notice this as strange, but at the time, they did not pay any mind to it. Now, something cool about Amy was that she really loved music. She loved to sing karaoke, she used to play the saxophone, and on the cruise, there was a band called Blue Orchid. Blue Orchid was a four-piece jazz band from the Caribbean. They played, covers of popular songs, and Amy and her brother would often go to them to recommend songs for them to play. And Amy, being a music lover, struck up conversations with Blue Orchid's bass player, Alistair Douglas. Now, Alistair Douglas is the prime suspect of this case, and I think, just to lay my cards out on the table, I've got a lot of opinions on this man, and to make it easier for everyone, I am just going to be referring to him as Yellow, because Yellow was what everyone else referred to him, and that was his common nickname back then. I've heard differing opinions as to why he was nicknamed Yellow. I don't really care. Everyone called him Yellow. So that is what I'm going to be referring to him going forward. Yellow was from Grenada, a small island in the Caribbean, and he had a pregnant girlfriend at home. Even though he was a musician in this band, he was still employed on this cruise ship, meaning he still had to adhere to all of the rules that all the other cruise employees had to. One of these rules, which was strictly enforced, I would say, is that employees cannot socialize with passengers past 1 a.m. However, Yellow was seen dancing and socializing with Amy until around 3:30 a.m. I am going to back up just a little bit because that entire night, Amy and Brad, they were dancing and hanging out with a lot of different people. And at around midnight, Ron and Iva, their parents, decided it was getting kind of late and they would head back to their cabin to go to sleep. They quickly check in with Brad and Amy to let them know, and they just leave them be. Brad is hanging out and talking to some girls on the other side of the club, but he could see Amy hanging out with Yellow, as well as some other musicians and some bar staff on an upper deck above him. And Brad, he wasn't the only person who saw Yellow with Amy around this time, late in the night, early morning hours. The photo I have here on the screen, it actually shows Yellow dancing with Amy, and this was shot by a videographer on the ship, and this was taken at around 2 a.m. There were also two young women named Lori and Crystal who had gotten to know the family previously throughout their time on the cruise. They were also present at this party, and they also spotted Amy and Yellow together. And with hindsight, this is all very weird because we know that he is not supposed to be socializing with her. But at the time, there was really nothing happening that seemed weird or out of the ordinary. Amy was a very social young woman, so for her to be dancing and talking to someone, really not that strange. Everything is fine. Brad is doing his own thing, Amy is doing her own thing, being a social butterfly, per usual. So everything is fine and nothing to worry about. But at around 3:30 a.m., that is when Brad decides it's getting kind of late and he wants to go to bed as well. So he finds Amy and he kind of motions at her. She's above him, he's below, and he kind of motions for her, "Hey, I'm going to bed." She nods, and about 5 minutes later, she follows him. The family shared a one-bedroom cabin suite, and like I mentioned earlier, Ron and Iva, they had already gone to bed several hours prior, and at 3:30 a.m., that is when Brad enters the room. At 3:35 a.m., Amy enters the room. Both Brad and Amy are enjoying some cigarettes and drinking some beer out in the balcony. They're talking about the festivities of the night and the festivities that will occur the next morning. And there are two things that are kind of important to note here. Brad says that Amy told him that Yellow had made a physical pass at her and that he had touched her breast while they were dancing. The way that she reacted to this, it didn't seem like that she took too much offense to this. And it doesn't seem like he also took too much of offense when she rejected him, because that's what she did. She said, "I don't think so," and made her stance very clear that she was not interested. It doesn't seem like there was any follow up with this. Doesn't seem that he pushed back or that she kind of gave him any attitude further. It just seemed like a mutual okay, and they moved on. Another thing that Brad mentions is that Amy said that she was feeling a little sick, but the way that she said it and the way he interpreted it, it was not that she was feeling nauseous and sick because she was drunk. It was more so because she was feeling a little seasick. But besides these two happenings of, Yellow making a pass at her and her laughing and shrugging it off, as well as her mentioning that she was feeling a little nauseous, other than that, Amy was in great spirits. She had a wonderful time that night, and she was really looking forward to exploring Curacao the next morning. At this time, the ship is already en route to Curacao, and they're about, give or take, an hour away. So it's around 4 a.m., and Brad tells Amy, "Hey, it's getting kind of late. I'm tired. We're going to be in Curacao soon. We should probably get to sleep." So he goes back into the cabin. Amy tells him that, she wants to stay out in the balcony, the air feels good, and that she'll be in, later. So he says, "Okay, I love you. Good night." He goes back in, and Amy stays out in the balcony. What happened after this is still being debated, but this is what we know. At around 5 a.m., Amy's dad woke up and saw her legs outstretched out on a chair out in the balcony. The balcony curtains were drawn, so he could not see the majority of her, but he could see her legs. Ron then goes back into his room for some more rest. Doesn't seem like he was doing a whole lot of sleeping that night, and at around 5:30, he goes back out and suddenly Amy is not there. There would really be no reason or explanation as to why Amy would not be in the cabin, and before, when he went to go check on her, she was out in the balcony and the balcony door was shut. But now, she's not out in the balcony and the balcony door is open around 12 to 18 inches. So, more so worried about the fact that the family would be waking up any moment now to go to Curacao, Ron goes out and try to find Amy. I don't think he was worried. I don't think he was angry. I think he just wanted to make sure that she was okay and kind of reminded her that they would be waking up any moment now, and she just pulled an all nighter. And if I may just add a little bit of my own 2 cents for a second, as someone who has been an independent researcher for this case for, I don't know, maybe 6 years, it wasn't until recently with the Netflix doc that people are really scrutinizing the family for no reason. I do not understand. And this is one of those things that people just make a big stink about, and I do not get it. A lot of people say, well, why would he be so worried so early? Why would he immediately go out there and look for her? Well, I don't know. It's 1998 and they don't have phones. So they can't just text each other and go, "Hey, where you at?" So if he's worried about her, he's going to look for her. And like I said, I don't think he's worried in the sense where He thinks something is wrong. I think he's more so worried, like, girl, you're gonna be exhausted. You just drank and just, we had an exhausting day back in Aruba. We got lost. You're probably sunburned already. You just drank. I can't imagine how exhausted she must be. So he's probably just looking for her because he's worried for her in that sense. And also, he's her dad. He can do whatever the fuck he wants, you know? She's an adult, but still, like, he's still her dad. And look, I'm not a parent, but I have two younger sisters that I adore with my whole heart, and we have been in countless hotel rooms together, traveling and moving across the country. And if something like this happened where I woke up and one of them was not in the room, I would go look for them because that is out of the ordinary. It's one thing for someone to not be in the room because you know that they're out partying, but it's another thing to wake up and they're just suddenly not there. So from 5:30 to 6 a.m., Ron is out searching all over the ship for Amy. It seems like in the beginning he assumed that he would find her pretty quickly, but as time went on and he kept looking, he realized she's not here. He looked in all the common areas, all the hallways, and everywhere he thought to look, but no sign of Amy. He went back to the cabin, he woke up Iva, and he told her that he cannot find her. Still, at this point, there really was no serious panic. Amy is an adult. She could be with some friends that she made, but it really was unusual for her to not at least let her family know that she was meeting someone. Something strange that happened while Ron was looking for Amy was that he spotted the chief security officer, Lou Costello, about 30 feet away from their cabin room at the end of the hall, and this would have been at around 6 a.m. At this point, Ron did not alert anyone that Amy was missing, so why Costello was standing near their room is beyond me, but when he saw him, he did alert him that Amy was missing. The timing of 6 a.m. is very important because this is approximately the time that the ship will be slowly drifting into port of Curacao. The ship would have been at the mouth of the port at around 6 a.m., and then it would spend about an hour drifting through this large channel, and then at 7 a.m. the docking process would begin, and passengers would disembark before 7:30. So at this moment of time, it's 6 a.m., and Ron is telling the security chief that Amy is missing. They have an hour to find her before the ship starts docking. Right off the bat, there does not appear to be any real sense of urgency from the cruise ship security or the captain or any of them. If there was any suspicion that Amy could have fallen overboard, they would and should have had rescue boats deployed, or at the very least, announce a code Oscar, but there was nothing. And after about an hour of searching, and time ticking, the reality of the situation was worsening, and the family begged the cruise employees to not let anyone off the ship. They were already starting to begin the disembarking process for the passengers, and the only announcement at this point was Amy Bradley, please come to the purser's desk. That means nothing if she's held captive. That means nothing if she's in the water. That means nothing if she's on the dock already. And in the midst of all this chaos, here comes Yellow. He's awake, he's calm, and he's walking across the pool deck. He sees Brad. Brad is sitting near the pool. He's stressed. He's thinking about Amy, where she could be. And Yellow comes up to him and he says, "Hey man, I'm sorry about your sister. You know, what happened? Where did you last see her?" And as Brad is explaining where she last was, Yellow stops him and says, "Hold on, I want my brother to hear this." So then he goes over and grabs his friend. He pulls him over to Brad, and then he goes, "Okay, now go." And that's when Brad explains the timeline again, going over where they last saw her, what she was last doing, and all that. Now, I don't know who his brother is. I'm assuming he is referring to his roommate, who is named Oscar Alexander. And again, I will be talking about all of these people in much more depth in future episodes. This one is just a brief overview of the case, so bear with me. But yeah, I don't know who this guy is. Brad said that he can't remember the face, so he can't confirm. I don't know. I find it to be a little weird that he would then have his roommate verify his story. It's kind of as if he already knows he has to build an alibi, or at least have someone to have his back to support his alibi. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. I don't know. It's hard to say, especially with hindsight. I try really hard to give Yellow the benefit of the doubt, but god damn, he makes it very difficult sometimes. But anyway, at this point, there is still no luck in finding Amy. The security assured the family that they should go back to their cabin while the security performs a more thorough search of the ship. They told the family they will search it top to bottom, every nook, every cranny. Meanwhile, all the other passengers, they disembarked into Curacao. But later in the morning, the security came back to them and told them they cannot find her and she is not on the ship, and that the family should leave the ship because they are conducting a water search, and if Amy is in the water, it would be better if the family were on land. At this point, the family is hysterical. They're in a foreign country, and their family member is nowhere to be seen. They have no ability to call her, and Amy would have had nothing with her besides her keycard, ID, cigarettes, and lighter. The water search for Amy was the largest in Curaçao's history. The military, the Curacao police, scuba divers, they were all dissecting the ocean and all its surrounding area. From almost all accounts, if Amy was in the water, she would have turned up, or at least something of hers would have. Soon, the FBI arrived, and the best way I can describe them is reserved. They did all the standard police work, they interrogated the family, they interrogate Yellow, they interrogate several others who knew her and what was happening, but one thing that is abundantly clear is that they are extremely limited on what they can and cannot do. And this is very important to remember. The FBI only has jurisdiction over Amy. That's it. They have no jurisdiction over the boat, they have no jurisdiction over the water, and they certainly have no jurisdiction in Curacao. So unless they have proof that Amy is anywhere else other than the cabin, they're stuck. There is not much they can do. They're stuck in that cabin room. The investigation did reveal some interesting things, though. Yellow, just like every other person on the ship, he had a key card to get him in and out of his room. These keycards only document the times the person uses the key to get into the room. It does not document when you leave the room, because you don't need your key to leave the room, you only need your key to enter the room. And Yellow's key card, it shows that he entered his room at 3:35 a.m., which makes perfect sense because that is the same time that Brad saw Yellow and Amy together near the bar, and then that was the time that he left. So it seems like Yellow would have split from Amy around the same time that Amy and Brad said their goodbyes. The only issue is that when Costello, the chief security, asked him about when the last time he saw her, Yellow insisted he only saw her at 1 a.m. and then he went right back into his room. When confronted with this lie, Yellow changed his story to be more in line with what the accurate keycard data shows. But Yellow was cleared. At this point, there was nothing to prove that he saw Amy after she went back to her cabin, so the FBI did not have enough to arrest him. And this is really where the case halted for a few days. Still, there was no sign of Amy. No one heard or saw her fall overboard. No one on land saw her fall overboard. There was no sign of her in the water, and there was no sign of her on the ship. The last thing we know is that sometime between 5 and 5:30 a.m., Amy was out on her balcony, opened the balcony door, came back inside her cabin, and that's all we know. Now, during this time, the cruise ship was still carrying on per usual. Missing persons flyers were distributed to all the other passengers, and another announcement for Amy was made over the loudspeaker, but that was really about it. The water search was clear. The family joined back on the ship in St. Martin, and while trying to recreate Amy's footsteps had she left the cabin, the family were suddenly met by two girls with frantic looks in their eyes. It was two young women, Lori and Crystal. They were absolutely beside themselves. because not only could they confirm seeing Amy with Yellow in the later hours of the morning at around 2 to 3 a.m., just like Brad, but they were also able to identify something much more troubling. They saw Yellow with Amy at the bar at 6 a.m. They were able to differentiate between the time of seeing her at 3 a.m. versus seeing her at 6 a.m. And they were even able to say that Yellow and Amy got into a glass elevator. He gave her a dark colored drink, and that was it. They were able to identify Yellow because they were also familiar with him, because he tried flirting with them. Keep in mind, they're 19. He is, in his late 20s, early 30s, and it made them feel a little creeped out. Lori, who still gives interviews to this day, says that Amy was wearing a white shirt and jeans. She last saw Amy with Yellow at around 5:30 to 6 a.m. in that glass elevator and then didn't see her again after that. But not too long later, the girls saw Yellow walk past them in a somewhat rushed, hurried motion, all alone. Shortly after seeing him, they decided they were tired, they hadn't slept yet that night, and they went back to their cabin. They didn't have their key card, so their mother let them in, and the mother even confirms letting them in at around 6 a.m. The FBI would later interview these two girls, but they paid them no attention and no mind. They chalked their story up to being two quote-unquote young drunk white girls. This is alarming for a few reasons. Number one, they didn't interview the mom to verify their story, and she was the one who let the girls in at 6 a.m. This was the time that the girls saw Yellow and Amy together. Number two, if them being drunk, or white, or young immediately makes their story false, then how many other witnesses did they dismiss? Number three, Amy went missing as a quote-unquote young drunk white girl. So if they are quick to disrespect two witnesses in a similar circumstance, how much energy are they really putting towards finding Amy? Number four, the girls weren't even drunk. They were with their family and they're underage. At this point, the family really had no reason to suspect Yellow. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary with him except for the fact that he was the last person Amy saw before she came back to her room. But now this is the information the family needs to move forward. If these girls are correct, this places Amy and Yellow together at the bar at 6 a.m. And this is really not that hard to believe either. Amy would have been smoking out on her balcony for about 2 hours after a night of drinking. I have always believed that if Amy left the cabin, she left to grab something to drink. I don't think she intended to meet anyone. I don't think she intended to stay longer than a few minutes just to go to the last area she knew to get something to drink. The bar. The bar she was just at a few hours ago. And a common rebuttal I hear from people, and they are genuine and serious when they say this, is, oh, what are the chances? What are the chances that Amy goes out to grab something real fast and she runs into Yellow again? Well, very likely. More likely than a typical vacation, because this is a cruise ship. They are not at some beach resort in Miami where everyone can just come and go as they please. This is a set group of people, and they're restricted to an area, and they literally cannot leave the area. They can't just leave the cruise ship whenever they want. And this is a time where the employees of the cruise ship should be starting their shifts soon, so should be waking up. So the people that pulled all-nighters will be going to bed soon, and the people that are starting their day are waking up now. And is it really that hard to believe that, let's just say she went to grab a water or a Coke and she saw Yellow there at the bar? Is it really that hard to believe that she would stay and chat with him? No. Everyone describes Amy as a social butterfly. If you talk to her, she'll talk to you. She was described as the light of the party that night. So, given that they spent a few hours together that night, I don't think it's out of character at all for her to strike up a conversation with him had she had seen him at the bar. And just to throw you a little bone as to what I think happened to Amy, let's say Yellow was waiting for the ship to dock to meet some particular people on the port. He may have offered Amy to accompany him. And that's really where I'm gonna leave you. The cruise ship eventually arrives back to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the family has to go back home to Virginia without Amy. But that is not where this case stops. In fact, this is just the beginning. In the next video, we will be discussing all about Curacao, the family's experience coming back for a land search. We will be talking about 3 extremely important eyewitness sightings who saw Amy on the island, and we will be talking at great lengths about the history, culture, and environment of Curacao and these southern Caribbean islands. The next few videos are going to be very dense, longer, and more detailed. I'm looking forward to getting into all the nitty-gritty with all of you and peeling back some more of these layers. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and we will talk more soon.